How about that? Oh, that's better. Okay. All right. All right. Well, welcome and thank you guys all so much for coming today. I'm going to talk about my exhibition that's in the next gallery, which is called What Do You Treasure? And it's about the ocean and plastic pollution. We are going to do a walkthrough of the exhibit together, but first, before we do that, I'd like to just give you a little bit of background on how the exhibit came to life. My connection to the ocean and art started when I was growing up as a kid in coastal Virginia. And although I initially pursued science for my career, I studied engineering and medicine and eventually trained as a plastic and reconstructive surgeon, I ultimately returned to my artistic roots. After 10 years of practicing surgery in San Francisco, I earned an MFA degree and then started my full-time career as an artist. So I've always been really moved by the ocean. It's just its beauty, its power, its peacefulness and spaciousness. And my fascination with the ocean continued to inspire my art. My first series as a professional artist was called Places for Reflection, and I painted large depictions of sea and sky on a background of gold and silver leaf. And this is to emphasize the reflective and the spiritual qualities of nature. And I'm going to show you a few paintings from this first series. This painting is on gold leaf. This painting's on white gold. And this one's on silver. I also do a lot of large-scale pencil drawings of the ocean surface, and I'm trying to evoke that sense of vastness and spaciousness that I feel when I'm out on the water. Here's some of my drawings, and hopefully you can get a sense of the scale of them. So, why make art about plastic? Well, my life as an artist was going along pretty nicely, but then I discovered a couple of very shocking things. The first shocking thing I learned about was the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Now, were you guys shocked when you learned about this? I mean, it's an area twice the size of Texas in the Pacific Ocean, and it's filled with plastic trash. There are actually 5 of these trash gyres in our oceans in the world, and they contain trillions of pieces of plastic. Most of the debris consists of small plastic particles that are suspended near the surface. And in 2012, 5 gyres researchers estimated that there are over 5 trillion pieces of plastic on the ocean surface. And that was 13 years ago. So you can imagine there's quite a bit more now. So this plastic is extremely harmful to marine life. I'm sure you guys have all seen pictures of marine animals trapped in plastic like this turtle, or this whale that died from eating plastic bags. And this photo shows an albatross that was found on Midway Island who died with a stomach full of plastic. And the mason jar here is actually the actual plastic found in the stomach of just one bird. In addition to these large plastic items, a lot of the plastic in the ocean is in the form of microplastic, which means pieces that are 5 millimeters in diameter or less. And most of this comes from degradation of large plastic things like fishing gear, bags, bottles. But a lot of it comes from primary sources like synthetic fibers from our clothing that gets into the ocean from coming out of our washing machines. Car tires are another big source. And there are other things like road markings, marine paint, and even microbeads and cosmetics, which have fortunately been outlawed in a lot of places. And of course, microplastics have been found on every continent, and they are also accumulating in the human body. So we found microplastic. I'm sure you've heard recently there's a study where people are finding it in the brain. It's in the lungs, the liver, the blood, the intestines, and even the placenta. Research into the effects on microplastic is really in its infancy, so we don't really know all the effects it's going to have on humans, but what we know so far is concerning. Another troubling fact about microplastic is that toxic chemicals stick to it. So microplastic in the ocean can pick up pollution like pesticides and DDT, and that can get into the fish's body when they eat it. And the plastic itself contains harmful chemicals too. There are phthalates and even forever chemicals that are in some of our common plastics. So when the fish eat these microplastics, the chemicals that are in the plastic or get attached to the plastic move up the food chain with the fish. And so when we eat the fish, our bodies absorb not only the microplastics, but the chemicals too. And as if this is not enough, the second shocking thing I learned was that hardly any of our plastic trash is recycled. In 2018 in the US, it was about 9%, which sounds pretty good when you compare to that it was less than 6% in 2021. So where does all the plastic go? In the US, this is according to the EPA in 2018, about 75% of it went to landfill, and it will emit greenhouse gases there. 16% was incinerated, which releases toxic and greenhouse gases, and about 9% was recycled. Now, these figures do not count for the massive amounts of plastic that we export to other countries that don't have very good environmental regulation. And that's how a lot of plastic ends up in the ocean. It's estimated that about 10% of worldwide plastic ends up in the ocean, and unfortunately, a lot of that is ours. So after learning all of this, I started to wonder, are our oceans vast enough to handle all this plastic? And I knew that I would need to address this problem with my art. So I experimented a lot, and one idea that seemed really interesting was gold leafing single-use plastic trash. So a lot of people say, well, why would you gold leaf trash? That seems kind of weird. But firstly, gold does draw our attention, and it symbolizes the sacred and the beautiful, but it's also a symbol of money and value. And money, because plastic is so cheap to make, is one of the big reasons that we use so much plastic. So, considering all these different meanings of gold, I wondered what would happen if I displayed my trash sculptures along with my gold leaf paintings. And thank you, Jackie Cherry, for this photograph. So my hope is that it would show this disconnect that I was feeling between our love for the ocean and the ways that we're destroying it with our rampant plastic consumption. So on that note, let's take a walk through the exhibition, and we'll go through and I'll talk about the different artworks in there and some of the sculptures that each have a story to tell about plastic. So if you guys want to come with me. In San Francisco, they opened this brand new Whole Foods out at Stonestown Mall a couple years back, and it was like the biggest, fanciest Whole Foods in San Francisco, and I was really excited to go. And I walked in, and I almost cried because there was so much plastic everywhere, like in the produce department. And just everything was in plastic. And it just was so disappointing to me. I was so excited to go, and I just felt like I wanted to cry after I went in there. And it's Whole Foods, their whole mission apparently was to give us healthier choices, but they're putting all that healthy food in plastic. And so that summer, I had a couple of interns working with me, so we went to Whole Foods and we bought a bunch of things that you can only find in plastic packaging. So everything in the shopping cart was something where there was no other alternative. And I think grocery shopping is just one of the biggest sources of single-use plastic, and it's a big problem. And moving along over here, this piece is called The Altar of Convenience. And why do we use so much plastic? It's super convenient. And it just begs the question, what do we worship more, in our society as a whole? But this piece also has a second message, and that's about microplastics. And a lot of this was really shocking to me when I learned it, but all of these things, except for the candles, are sources of microplastic in our diet. The water bottles all contain microplastic. So it's much better to drink tap water than bottled water if you can. The Starbucks cups are a very surprising source of microplastic. I did a project a few years back, and we found that Starbucks sold enough plastic cups in like 1 year to circle the globe 3 times. And that's just Starbucks. But these cups are made of paper with a plastic liner. And so you can't recycle them. I mean, you technically could, but the process of separating the paper from the plastic would just be too costly. So you can't compost them. So they really have to go in the landfill, in the garbage. But what's even worse, and this is something we've learned more recently, is that plastic liner on the inside of these cups releases nanoplastic and microplastic into your drink every time you get a hot drink from Starbucks. And then we're learning this stuff is accumulating in our brains. I mean, that is not a joke. And so I'm really encouraging people to bring your own cup or get a ceramic mug when you go to a coffee shop, because these cups have potential issues that I think we're just learning about. But they do, people study, and it's like billions of micro and nanoplastic that can be like one hot drink from one of these. And then that brings me to the tea bags, which some of you may have heard that, but some tea bag companies have the bag material made from plastic. Or even PLA, which is a bioplastic, which I'm not, and they say that's safe, but we don't really have any health data to show that that's safe. And a lot of them have plastic glue to hold them together. And so what you really want to do if you really like tea bags is do some research on the companies that you buy them from. There's like Republic of Tea. I actually personally talked to them and asked them, they don't use any plastic glue in their bags. And I think like Numi, Organic India, those I think were plastic free. And there were also quite a few others, but there were some that were really surprising to me, like Mighty Leaf that comes from Pete's, has uses plastic in their bags. So, and again, researchers at universities have put these bags into hot water like you make your tea, and they found like billions of microplastic released into the drink. So, loose leaf tea is another great option. But yeah, check your tea bags if you'd like tea. I know, it's very shocking. I need to learn this. Yeah.
But it's very interesting. What you're saying about this, it is possible to get corporate to change. I mean, what happened many years ago with laundry detergent. You tell the engineers, look, you need to design this, or you've been engineering forever.
Yeah.
You got to give them the specification. You have to make packaging that doesn't do this.
Exactly.
And with the groundswell of movement, when people hear about this and say, look, you can get them to change.
Right. And then we have to know about it. Yeah. So the pressure. Like apparently in England, they love their tea there. And Barry's tea is a really big brand there. And Barry's tea was using plastic in their bags. And when people in England found out about it, they lost their minds. And they contacted Barry's, and Barry's changed it. So they did respond to their customers. But I think here in the U.S. we're not as aware of this, and we're not as much of a tea culture. But I think it is something that it's good for us to know and to advocate about.
But we do have the plastic, again, Starbucks, somebody needs to contact them.
Well, Starbucks actually knows it's a problem, and they're trying to do something about it, but it's really hard. And they haven't been able to engineer a better cup. They're trying to make some compostable cups, but those may have some health issues we don't really know yet. I mean, what's really best is if you bring your own cup, and Starbucks will let you bring your own cup. So, I mean, that's really the best thing to do if you're going to go, if you want to go coffee, just bring your own.
Yeah.
And then you just don't even have to think about any of this. Yes. They only offer 10 cents, and you're right, but they give you a better one. No, I mean, it saves so much money. So this piece here is a more simple one. This is called the Crystal Geyser Collection. And when I would just go and walk through my neighborhood, I would pick up these plastic bottles for art projects. And Crystal Geyser was the #1 brand that I found of bottled water. And I put my little plug in. Try not to ever drink bottled water unless you really have to. Bring your own. Yes.
One objection I have is Fiji water. Is the water really any better in Fiji than you take in all the way to California? It's water. Right. And it's packaged in plastic.
Yes.
And you're using fuel to bring it.
Exactly. I mean, you're absolutely right. But the bottled water industry has really gotten a lot of people to believe that bottled water is somewhat safer. And yet, if you're in an area with a disaster and you don't have any running water, then yes, that's probably your best option. But really, it's totally unnecessary, really, here. production, and our renewable technologies, energy are really making some good progress. But one area we haven't done very well in is plastic. And the United States, when I did this piece, was in the process of bringing on 42 new plastic refineries online. And of course, they all are going to low-income communities. Like there's the Cancer Alley in Louisiana that's just filled with these refineries, and the people there really suffer health effects from them. But if you look at the oil companies' own emissions data, the emissions from these 42 plastic refineries is the same as adding 27 new coal plants. So plastic is also a climate change issue, and the oil companies unfortunately are limiting plastic because they've seen that electrification is coming, and so they're planning on ramping up the plastic production, which leads me to the next piece over here, which is called 2050. And this is the year that they estimate that we will have more plastic in the ocean than fish. And that's because if you look at graphs of plastic production, they're just going up very steeply. So unless we cut our plastic production, this really may be our future. I'll come over here. This one in the middle, this one is kind of one of my favorite ones. It's really fun. But I found a lot of Coke and Pepsi bottles when I was out on my walks. And I learned that Coca-Cola is the number one plastic producer, plastic polluter in the world. And Pepsi company is number 2. So Coca-Cola won the gold medal and Pepsi won the silver. Even though both of these companies have gotten a lot of grief from their customers, and they've talked about using more, using less plastic, they're actually using more plastic than ever. So they're talking a game, but they're not really doing anything. Which brings you to another concern, is that some companies think that, well, we'll add more recycled content to our plastic, which is probably good except for food and beverage use, because as you saw in the presentation, some plastic can get contaminated. Like if someone recycles their Coke bottle in their bin and it's next to their empty Roundup container, that plastic's going to be contaminated, but there's no way to test it, so that might end up in somebody else's Coke bottle. So I think we do have to be careful about using recycled content, especially when it's around food and beverage. And this little piece is just my tribute to styrofoam peanuts. I know, yeah, they're the worst, but they're actually kind of beautiful. People leave them. And these are really bad because this looks like food to marine life when they get into the ocean. So hopefully, I'm not seeing these as much in the mail, but these are just things I got unsolicited, ordered something and there it was. But I'm seeing more cornstarch peanuts, but what would be even better if we just reuse the cornstarch peanuts instead of just composting them, or what if you just had places where you could reuse them?
Well, there used to be glass Coke bottles, but then, which are recyclable, they're so much heavier for transport than everything else.
I know. We do have to figure out the logistics of it. Because plastic is so lightweight, it does save money to transport, but you can't really undo a lot of the effects of it. So I think we've got to figure out
And the
the best
interesting
way.
thing is, humans created plastic. I'm trained sculptor. The images are from down in the studio before plastic. He had to keep, wet drapes over all of the clay work, all the time. So he had plastic. So again, they created things.
Yeah.
But now we find out the unintended consequences.
Exactly. And it's super useful. It wouldn't be so popular if it wasn't so useful, but it's. And then we'll go over to this one. This one's called Grab and Go. And again, this one is all the stuff that I grabbed for lunch. It's like the little liquefied plastic containers and the wrappers for the snack bar and the coffee and the utensils. And none of these things are recyclable. And so I just wanted to kind of point out that a lot of the stuff in the Grab and Go case, it may have chasing arrows on it, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be recycled. Which brings me to the final piece I want to talk about. This one's called wish cycling. And I don't know about you, but I sure put a lot of stuff in my recycling bin that I hope is going to get recycled. And that's what we call wish cycling, because it's not really clear what gets recycled. And when this piece started out, I found that there's certain types of plastic that almost never get recycled. You've got the sushi trays, which are number 6
plastic, which is polystyrene. I shouldn't even be having our food on that, but that's another story. We've got the Starbucks cup, which we talked about. There's a yogurt container, which is number 5 plastic, which is super common with food, but almost none of that gets recycled. And then this orange juice is actually number 7 resin plastic, which is miscellaneous. So it could be anything in there, so that's probably not going to get recycled either. But as I started researching this project, I started doing a little bit more of a deep dive. And I was really worried about those recycling numbers, which are so low. And so, what's going on? So if you go back into the 1980s, when plastic started to get really popular, people started complaining about all the plastic litter that was piling up. And so the plastics industry realized that they needed to do something. So they started a marketing campaign.
PR, of course.
Yes, and so they got everybody to get blue bins, and they lobbied for the chasing arrow symbol. So that's why you have chasing arrows on every piece of plastic. So it made us think that it was going to be recycled, and it actually wasn't. And they also opened a bunch of recycling plants. But unfortunately, the plastic recycling didn't work. And there's a lot of reasons for this. One, it's really hard to sort it. It's dirty, it's got food in it. All the different resins are actually different types, so how do you know what's the exact same stuff? And the way you recycle it is that you grind it up into little pieces and you remelt it down. So the recycled stuff is not as good as the new stuff. You can only recycle it probably twice max before you can't even recycle it anymore. And the quality of it's not very good. So from a business perspective, if you're a company, well, you're going to want to buy the new virgin plastic because 1, it's cheaper, 2, it's better quality. And so there's not really a big market for recycled plastic. And the third thing is that when you grind it up at these recycling plants, it creates a lot of microplastic, which gets washed right to the waterways. So the recycling process is putting more microplastic into the environment. And microplastic is probably the hardest stuff to get rid of. So kind of my lesson from doing this project was that really all plastic recycling, and I'm not talking about glass, aluminum, or paper, because those recyclings work great, but just for plastic, it really is kind of recycling. And I got a quotation from Judith Enck, who was one of the EPA administrators previously, and she just says, plastic recycling is not working, it's not going to work. So we've got to come up with something better.
In our current culture, this question of what do we treasure, it really seems to be kind of an either-or choice. And it's pretty obvious by the state of things that nature is not winning over convenience right now. But is there any way it could be a both and? Is there any way we can have our conveniences in ways that serve the planet instead of destroy it? And there actually are a lot of solutions in this direction, and some are in individual actions that we can take. So, what can you do? So first, I want to reiterate, like we talked about previously, that more recycling is not the answer. The best solutions are going to involve reducing plastic. And so I've got a few ideas on things you can do to reduce your plastic footprint. Again, reusable bottles, water, coffee, tea drinks, whenever you're out, these are great. You might notice that some of these bottles have a stainless steel lid, which is probably a little healthier as far as hot beverages go. Choose glass or aluminum when you can, and these reusables like Strauss milk bottles are even better. Refill shops, if you have access to them, are great. And buying in bulk is also really effective, especially if you bring your own container. Reusable produce bags and grocery bags can really help. And also, if you can shop less online to avoid all that plastic packaging, that can really make a difference. We learned that Marin County, a few years back, spends over $7 million a year just processing Amazon waste. And so it's really costing us as taxpayers a lot of money to process all this plastic waste that we all get from shipping. Divest. Again, remove your money from businesses that support single-use plastic and tell them why. And look for plastic-free solutions. I don't know if you guys noticed, but we have a little display over there with some plastic-free ideas. And these are some, they're fairly simple and straightforward. And there are a few quick things I want to say about this. One, try to keep your food, especially your hot food, away from plastic as best you can. You can switch to plastic cutting boards, cooking utensils, food storage, and these are pretty simple ways to reduce the amount of plastic that might get into your body. And then I have one more quick word of advice from Judith Inc., and she says, never ever put plastic in the microwave. It's true, because the heat will heat the food, and the chemicals and microplastic have been shown to migrate into the food. So yeah, please don't ever do that. But in addition to these individual actions, we need systemic change. And we're going to have to redesign how we access our conveniences. Here's an example. This is a company called Useful, and they provide stainless steel reusable containers on college campuses for takeaway food. So, I mean, because if you go on a college campus, oh my God, there's like all this disposable plastic everywhere. So this is actually a pretty good solution. We need designers to come up with more creative ideas. So all you young people out there in college, studying design and creativity, you guys are going to be how we get out of this mess. And personally, I would love to see stores have plastic-free zones, so it'd make it easier to shop without plastic. And there's a thing called extended producer responsibility laws, which is a big mouthful, but basically what this means is that companies who sell the plastic have to help pay to clean it up. And the good news is that the EU has passed these laws, Canada's passed them, and a lot of states in the US have, including California, so go us. So is there any hope? Yes, I think there is. But we're facing an uphill battle. Despite all these new laws, plastic is still everywhere. But pressure from people like you has made a difference, and we need to keep the pressure on. And it's really important to reduce the amount of plastic that you use, and not just for the ocean, but for your own health. So I'm going to leave us with a call to action. Individuals have made a difference. And can you commit to making at least one change to reduce your plastic use? Thank you.